It's great to get you in the booth here. So, CEO, co-founder of Axle API, right?
Yeah.
Right? So tell us a little bit about Axle API and what it is that you guys do.
Totally. So we build two different products, but ultimately the ethos comes down to try to get as much data from your business into one place, so that we can connect to all your customers, the carriers that you're working with. One of our products primarily focuses on ELD and shipment tracking integrations. So we work with software companies, some startups that you might have heard of, like A2B, LogRock. And we basically connect to as much data as we can on their carrier side, the fleet side, make that really easy for them. On the second product that we're building, think about it as a 3PL or as a broker. All the different software that you're using, right? You might be connecting to a TMS. Each of your customers has a different track and trace solution, has a different scheduling solution that they want you to use. You're on the phone all the time, you're listening to all these emails, and you want all that information in one place. So we use AI and machine learning to parse different conversations, to auto-build loads, auto-populate your TMS, bring all of that experience into a sidebar in your Gmail or your Outlook, so you don't have to spend any time switching between tabs and looking at different software. Let's say someone comes in and says, hey, I'm not going to make the drop off. You got to do something about it. We'll automatically tell you, hey, here are the 3 spots that are probably the best next appointments, and then you just have to pick one. Trying to keep that. We know that relationships matter so much in this industry, right? People care about things, and people care about each other. And we don't want to take that away from folks.
That's good.
So workflow automation means human in the loop, and so it's kind of I said a lot, but anything around data, workflow automation, we're trying to get our hands on it.
Very interesting, and I'm curious too. I mean, because you're co-founder, right? So I'm curious. What's your background, and where did this idea come from? I mean, why focus on the supply chain arena?
Totally. So I started my career actually in micromobility, if you're familiar, like bikes and scooter sharing, last mile delivery, that kind of thing. A lot of urban logistics, and spent years doing research in college, and coming out into trying to start my own company that didn't work out so well, and then spending.
That's how you learn.
That's how you learn. You're exactly right. That's how you learn. You figure out what type of people you like to work with, what types of things you like to build, what types of roles you want to be in. But anyway, so that's started there. But as we started to build that out, as I started to learn more and more, people kept asking us the question, well, can you do this for bigger and bigger things? It started off with, can you do this with local delivery fleets where we've got a fleet of vans? Can you do this with trucks? Can you do this in long haul? And we were like, I think we can. I think it's the same source of data. And we, so then what we started to do was we started to do something called CAN hacking, which is where you, so there's a device on every car called the CAN bus. Which is basically like the CPU of the vehicle.
Right.
Yeah, totally. And so we started hacking into that. We were working with a lab, and just had a great time doing that. And people started asking more and more for that kind of data, which is what ELDs are actually predicated on. And so we started that's kind of how we got our start, building that integration, pulling that data out for ELDs, and kind of scaling up from there.
Very interesting stuff, and definitely, data is such a big thing within our industry, right? I mean, there's so much data that's flying around and being generated, but having the ability to, I guess, harness that data, right, and put it together and be able to make decisions based on that, I mean, is probably the biggest challenge, right, of the data aspect. I mean, it's one thing to generate data; you're always generating data, but when you try to get it together, that's when the challenges really come. So, I mean, how have you seen that, some of the companies maybe that you're working with or talking to, I mean, what are some of their biggest challenges they say around that data, whether it's like visibility or just understanding it?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, there's actually two. One of them is that there's just too much of it. There's this term from 2010, back when big data was the next big thing, data deluge. And I think that's only gotten worse. Because the problem is now that you're splitting your time between everybody who's jockeying for attention. Your TMS is jockeying for attention. Your phone is ringing all the time.
Yeah.
Your inbox, all your notifications are on. You're getting news notifications at the same time. You're getting Instagram notifications. But you also have a day job to do.
Yeah.
And so that information overload means that it's really hard to parse out the important things and then do the simple things, because you start making those mistakes. We've been seeing a lot of fraud, a lot of phishing fraud in particular. For example, you might get an email from, a Kevin, but
Whoa,
they
what are you trying to say?
Yeah, no, I'm saying I don't know. I'm just saying. You might get an email from a Kevin.
Yeah.
But they spell their name Keven,
right?
And they're trying to impersonate you, right? You might just not notice because you're so busy, dealing with a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
You might just not notice, and now you're falling for a scam, and you've given your information out to someone. You've double brokered by accident. And people don't do this stuff on, at least good faith people don't do this stuff on purpose. They just make mistakes, and it happens. And so I think that that overload is one of the biggest problems, and we try to simplify that as much as possible by bringing information into one place, whether it's through our API product connecting to many to one, or whether it's through our workflow automation product we call Beacon, again connecting many into one interface. The second big problem I think is that logistics, especially, it's just messy. That's
true.
All over the place. So not only do you have too much information, but none of that information makes any sense because a lot of it is contradictory, or you're not able to get some of it. For example, someone didn't turn on their macro point, didn't turn on their Project 44 or whatever, right? Now you're stuck. Now you have no real-time visibility, and you have to find another way to do that. So I think between those two problems, anything that can kind of help bring that down, streamline that, that's kind of what we've been looking to build.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that makes so much sense because it is there is so much data flowing, and and especially supply chain, we love our systems and we have multiple systems, definitely multiple outputs, multiple inputs, all this stuff coming out, and having to try and put it together and figure it out. I mean, at some point, I talked to somebody the other day, and they're like, oh, we have a customer, and they spent $1 million on a system to have better visibility, and they said nobody looks at the system.
No.
So I was like, it's too much stuff going on, right? So you really have to have something like you guys that's kind of going to overlay that in it and point out the things that I guess you need to be looking at, right? Like what's really important, where do I really go to make these decisions that I need to make, and have this technology take care of all of that behind the scenes analysis and everything, and really just get to what we need from data is to be able to make a decision, like a human decision. So I mean, how, if I'm a company and I'm having some issues with my data, or I have multiple systems, I mean, when do I start to understand and realize that I'm at a point where I need you guys as a solution?
That's such a great question. I think if you're if you're a smaller shop, there's a point where everybody on your team, and you know what everybody is working on all the time. I mean, we're a relatively young company. Fewer than 10 people work for us. We know what everybody is up to at any given time, and we know what all our customers are doing. We know what all of our vendors and partners are doing. You can get that bird's eye view, but eventually you start thinking about building teams. Eventually you start thinking about differentiating work streams, and you slowly start to lose visibility. Maybe you grow enough to start thinking about outsourcing, all sorts of staffing companies. But then you have to put up arms for training. You have to put up arms for getting those processes exactly streamlined, because folks that are outsourced, they're not necessarily domestic. They don't fully understand domestic shipping or trucking or whatever, which is totally fine. I think there's a time and place for everything, but you have to have that process down. And I think that's where you start hitting those walls where, maybe instead of outsourcing, maybe I can leverage software to solve most of these problems and get the basic stuff out of the way, so that these people that I've hired who are intelligent and expensive can spend, can use that brain power to do hard things. That's when I think, when you start hitting those limits. When you start stretching yourself, stretching your team, and they start complaining like, hey, I can't spend all my time doing data entry. I can't spend all my time picking up the phone and calling someone about, something really basic. That's when you want to start leveraging software to fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people try to do too much too early, and most people end up really far down in the game and they're just stuck.
Yeah.
And that's going to take a lot of time to unstuck, or get unstuck. So that's I think that's how I'd balance it. You start hitting this inflection point where you're like, I can either outsource or I can either invest in software. And I think maybe you have to do both, but software is probably the right place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a really great answer because it is understanding like where are you at in this journey of trying to make the supply chain better or optimize or digitize and all these things, and those terms, they get thrown around so much, right? From news perspective, marketing perspective, right? But it's really understanding like when do I do this? Like when do I take these moves? So it's great to get that insight from you. So really interesting stuff with you here, Dhruv, and I appreciate you coming by and talking to us about Axle API. If people are interested in learning more, how can they do that?
Yeah, shoot me an email. It's my first name, dhruv@axleapi.com. Right. Probably the easiest way to reach us.
All right, great. Cool. So let's flood the inbox, right? Definitely, yeah.
Well, hey, this is a blast.
Yeah. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much.
Good to learn about this, and we'll be in touch, definitely.
Love the podcast. Catch you later.
Thank you. Have a good one.